Mute your phones, please. Got any associated devices you have in your wrist that might be buzzing off as well? And as much as possible, refrain from talking to each other because the speakers are really super sensitive and the Zoomies will hear that and then they'll go down this rabbit hole like, look, what are they talking about? Forget at all what our presenter was talking about.
And
I'll get you.
We're on for Zoom? Okay. Welcome. I'm Beth Powell and I'm with the RVAR Education Committee. Today's presentation is one that we thought would be very helpful to you. This is a hybrid class, so we've got people on Zoom and we've got people in person. Laura Benjamin will be taking care of everybody via Zoom, so she'll let me know when we've got questions on Zoom. For those of you on Zoom, please stay muted until you're asked for a question. There will be times where we will ask for questions via Zoom. And Laura will monitor that and unmute you, or she'll ask the question for you. We are recording today's class and it will be available for about 90 days afterwards. And we will send you a link for that so that you'll know how to watch it again. We're providing a survey so that you can tell us what you think of this class and if there's other ideas that you'd like to have. Anything that you think you'd like for us to cover next year that would be helpful to you, we'd like to know. We're here to teach, help present you. So let's talk about the next two classes coming up. May 20th, we're going to do a class called The Price is Right. And that's going to be Curtis Burchett with MKB, and I'll be teaching as well. He's going to talk about more traditional way of doing a CMA, and I'm going to be talking about more of the Flex CRS and the RPR. So that'll be Tuesday, May 20th. Then in June, we're going to have a class titled Unsure About Insurance. And we're going to address how the national catastrophes affect your rates. We're going to talk about issues that impact sellers and buyers, insurance inspections, all sorts of things. So that will be Tuesday, June 17th. And online registration is open for both. Now, for today's class, we've got Chris Moore with Solid Rock Enterprises. I learned about him through some senior type things with the CAPS training, and he's going to tell you a little bit about what that is. But he makes sure that people can stay in their home longer and what some of those things mean, what some things are to look for. And if you've got a client or a parent or anybody that's going to be aging in place, he's the person that's going to teach us about that. So Chris, it's all over to you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Beth. And thank you all for being here. I know that everybody's time is valuable and I hear there's some real estate that needs selling. So how's everybody doing today? Great. I'm doing fantastic. I'm doing particularly fantastic today because I got up this morning and my legs work. I got up this morning and my arms work. My eyes can see things and my ears can hear things. And these are things that most of us take for granted. But I work every day with clients who are not fortunate enough to say what I just said. And in my work as a contractor working with aging in place clients, I have the unmitigated privilege of being able to make a difference in people's lives. I'm able to work with people who haven't had a shower in 2 years. And I'm able to go in, take out their tub and put in a curbless shower. And they can take a shower. And I told Beth I had said some bullet points back in October of what I was going to speak about today. And I'm going to cover as much of those as I can, and the ones that I don't cover, I will a YouTube video and cover them in there. My YouTube channel is Senior Remodeling Experts. I've recently rebranded from Solid Rock Enterprises to Senior Remodeling Experts. Solid Rock Enterprises is based on the scripture that says, the wise man built his house on the solid rock, and when the storm came, it stood, where the foolish builder built his house on the shifting sands. And some people got that, but a lot of people said, so you build stone walls or do you do sheetrock? And so we have transitioned just in the last couple of months to Senior Remodeling Experts. But just a little bit about kind of how I came to be in the aging in place market. I started my business in 2001. For the first part of the 21st century. I was pretty much a framing contractor. We were framing big houses in Ashley Plantation and the Hill in Salem, and all around people were building. Some of you that have been in the industry for a while remember those days when people thought they could build anything and make money on it. And that all came to a screeching halt in 2008. And so I was looking for a new way to make a living. And about that same time, my mom and dad, who had been living in Arizona in an age-restricted community for 15 years or so, my mom had a stroke and they moved back to Virginia to be closer to family and to get some help. And my dad bought a house, and my mom came home to her new house in a wheelchair. And there were 6 or 7 steps in the front door, and there were 6 or 7 steps to the deck in the backyard. And so I built my very first wheelchair ramp. And so one thing led to another. I took the CAPS training, which Beth mentioned, which is Certified Aging in Place Specialist through the National Association of Home Builders. And I started learning about some facts. And one of the things I learned that was really striking to me is that only 15% of us will go through our entire lives without a mobility impairment of one kind or another. Maybe we're very active and maybe we break our leg skiing, or maybe we are, 97 years old and we have a hard time getting around. But if 15% of us go through our entire lives without a mobility impairment, why are we building houses for 15% of the population? It doesn't make any sense. Last week, I went on a walkthrough with a couple, and they were buying a house. And the house is a patio home. And the patio home is part of a retirement community that includes a CCRC, a continuing care retirement community. And so the idea is that this community is for what Rush Limbaugh used to call seasoned citizens. People that have had a few birthdays behind them. And they asked me to come out and walk through this home with them and see if it was suitable to their needs. And they pulled up, and the woman got out of the car with a walker, with a rollator, and she was, somewhat hesitant walking with her walker until she was a little unstable, and her balance was not great. And so we proceeded to walk through this house that should have been designed and built for an older couple. And the first thing that we find is there's about an 8-inch step from the driveway up onto the front porch. There's another 8-inch step from the front porch in the front door. There's an attached garage, but there's yet another 8-inch step from the garage into the house. And so with a great deal of difficulty and a little bit of help, we got her into the house. And then most of the doors, the interior doors, were 3-foot wide doors, which is good. They got that right. On the back of the house, there's a beautiful patio. There's a 10-foot wide
expanse of glass, which is the patio door leading out onto the patio. Another 8-inch step, of course, out on the patio. But of this 10 feet of glass, the actual opening that you have to go through to get out onto the patio is 23 inches. It's not even 2 feet wide. And it's a sliding glass door, and there's about a 2-inch track on the bottom. So you have to step over a 2-inch track, down an 8-inch step, through a 23-inch wide opening to get onto the patio. It gets worse. The master bathroom has a shower with an 8-inch curve. They really like 8 inches. And a 22-inch opening leading into the shower. Now, this was a very nice house. It had vaulted ceilings. The finishes were not, high end. The overall was designed to be somewhat luxurious. But in the things that mattered for the market that this house was supposed to have been built for, it didn't work. And so, why is that? So I'm going to talk about today, how do you move a market? And when we talk about the real estate market, we often think about things like interest rates and home prices and those kinds of things that you guys live and die by, because it changes the market. When those things change, it changes, who can qualify, who's interested in buying a home and all of that. And those things are cyclical, and they'll always be cyclical, and it's totally outside of my realm of expertise. So that's not what I mean by move a market. What I'm talking about is, how do we change the market in terms of creating homes for people, that regular people who deal with these issues. As a society, we're getting older. In the next few years, the number of people in our country over the age of 65 will outnumber those 18 and under for the first time. There's 10,000 people a day turning 65. The percentage of older people to younger people continues to rise. And quite frankly, in the real estate market, who demographically, who has money to buy a house? It's the seniors. The young people, it's hard to start a household. I read a statistic that in the early to mid 70s, on average, it took 3.7 years of the average wage earner's wages to buy the average house. Today it's 7 years. So homes are half as affordable as they were in the 70s. And so the older people are the ones oftentimes who have the money, to buy a house. And there's these developments, there's these subdivisions, there are these housing that is supposed to be designed for them, and yet we have what I just described. I'm a builder, I'm a contractor. Builders as a group tend to be set in their ways. We like to build houses the way we've always built them because we know that works. Okay, we've built it that way for 30 years or 40 years or however long, and we know that we're not sure if this other way works. The step from the garage into the house is a good example. That used to be code. It used to be required by code that you had to have an 8-inch step from the garage into the house. And the theory was that if you left your car running in the garage and the door from the garage into the house open, you could get carbon monoxide poisoning. Well, I mean, you can't legislate against stupidity. I mean, people know, most people know you don't leave your car running in the garage. So anyway, that has not been code for probably 25 years. You can build a house where the garage floor and the house floor are the same level. If you do that and you put a nice wide door between the garage and the house, you're golden, because that 0-step entry is the #1 feature that should be included in every house to make it accessible, to make it aging in place friendly. There should be at least one way to get in that house without having to climb a step. And if you can accomplish that, then everything else gets easier. And the second most needed feature for an aging in place house is an accessible bathroom. And when I say accessible bathroom, I mean it should have a wide door, a 3-foot door, at least a 32-inch net clear opening door into the bathroom. There should be a 5-foot diameter circle for turning radius. There should be a curbless shower. There should be a shower that you can get into without having to step over a curb. And people ask me all the time, well, what keeps the water in? Well, we build dozens and dozens of curbless showers. And there are different, it's outside the scope of this class, but there are a number of features that you can do to keep the water in your curbless shower. And for anybody that's interested, I'm teaching CAPS May 14th through 16th. That's totally online. It's through the Roanoke Regional Home Builders Association. You can go to their website, rrhba.com, and register for that class, which is 3 days of details about all what I'm talking about today. So anybody that's interested in getting, more knowledge and more understanding about housing and aging in place. So
Repeat that.
the May 14th through 16th is the class, the next class, and that's CAPS, Certified Aging in Place Specialist. And you can sign up. You go to rrhba.com. That's the Roanoke Regional Home Builders Association. Go to calendar and go to May 14th, 15th, and 16th, and there's a link there to sign up. And you've all got my card. You can also reach out if you have questions about it. So accessible bathroom, wide enough door to get in, at least 32 inches wide, a curbless shower, fall prevention, grab bars and handholds. Normally we talk about them in the bathroom. Any place in the house, if you have someone who is at fall risk, who is losing their balance, who is concerned about falling, having something to hold on to throughout the house is important, but especially in the bathroom, the floors are slippery. People get in the tub, or they get in the shower and they're relaxed and they get out and the floor is slippery, and that's where a lot of times people fall. And a fall, more often than not, is the event that is the beginning of the end of somebody living independently. Because when my mother was living, she would fall, she'd go to the hospital, she'd go to rehab, she'd come home from rehab, she'd have occupational therapy and physical therapy in her home. Just about the time she was regaining her strength and her balance and starting to feel pretty good, Medicare in its infinite wisdom said, you no longer qualify for services. And so the therapy would stop. And within 3 or 4 weeks, she'd start to lose everything she had gained. And then she'd fall again, and the whole process would start all over. So, homes that are what I call user friendly. And most of what we talk about in aging in place in terms of the modifications we make to homes are common sense. A level floor, doors that are wide enough to get through with a walker, with a wheelchair, grab bars. So builders we're set in our ways. One of the greatest examples that I know of why builders don't like to try new products is many years ago, there was a new treatment for fire treated plywood. That on a duplex, on a multifamily type situation, the firewall's got to go all the way to the roof. So the plywood, the roof sheathing over that firewall's got to be fire treated. Well, they came out with a new and improved. My grandmother always used to say, new and improved is worse. So anyway, they used this fire treated plywood. It was used a lot in the Northeast. And they built lots and lots of apartment buildings with this fire treated plywood on the roof. Many years later, they found out that after about 20 years in a hot attic, this plywood turned into dust, essentially. It just fell apart. The heat would destroy it. And so millions and millions of dollars in replacing roofs, and those kinds of things are why builders often don't. Now, there's a little bit of movement. They're using a little wider doors in some cases, but a lot of these features I just described in this walkthrough it's just the way it's always been done. And so what will it take to move the market? What will it take for accessible homes to become the norm instead of the exception? And I think what it's going to take is it's going to take the public demanding these features. When the home buying public starts saying, I'm not gonna buy that house, it's got a step from the garage into the house. Build me one where I can pull in my garage and I can roll into the house. I can walk into the house without climbing a step. And the thing that gets me is the same features that benefit somebody in a wheelchair benefit the young couple with the baby and the baby stroller. The guy delivering the refrigerator is going to love you if you have, right? I mean, it's common sense. It's not aging specific. And I think that's where a lot of the resistance comes from. It's our perception in our society of what it means to grow older. People don't want to talk about getting older. They don't want to talk about, it's taboo to think about, well, maybe I might not be getting around as well as I used to. Maybe I'm having issues. And so we think that getting older is a terrible thing. I think it's a blessing to have. Next year, I'll be in the construction industry for 40 years. I will have 25 years in my business. And, I have learned lessons that, you don't learn in a book, you don't. And so why are we like, getting older is not, it's just, it doesn't make any sense to me. So I think public demand. And I'd be curious, how many of you have had prospective clients say, I'm looking for a house that has any of the features that I mentioned? So over half. And were you able to find houses like that?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Eventually, but it's hard.
Yeah. I mean, they're just not out there. And so you have people that, maybe they live in a large 2-story home. They raised their family in it. And now, all the bedrooms and all the baths are on the second floor. We recently did a project for a woman, and we took her living room and her dining room and we converted it into a master suite so that she would, have it all on the first floor.
Cool.
Because she didn't want to move. Because moving's a pain. Moving's a lot of work. And so when we have that situation, when we have somebody who all the bedrooms and bathrooms are upstairs, it's make living quarters on the first floor, figure out some way to get upstairs, whether that be with an elevator, with a lift, with some kind of mechanical conveyance typically,
or, build an addition out the back with living quarters in it. And we are seeing more master suite on the first floor in a two-story home. I mean, I think that's way more prevalent than it used to be. So that's progress. Multi-generational housing is kind of experiencing a comeback. We've done a number of projects where, the idea that we would have multiple generations living under the same roof, which I think is so interesting because it goes back to what I call Walton's model, which used to be what everybody did, didn't give it a second thought. That's how we lived. We took care of our family, we did what just was without thinking about it. And so that's coming back because we talk about aging in place as if it were, it was this great new idea we have of aging in place. And it's not new at all. I mean, it's just what everybody used to do without thinking about it. And it was really after World War II and society became more mobile and, grown children sometimes were across the country and everybody was busy and nobody really wanted to take the time to care for our seniors. And so this whole idea of, we'll create senior living facilities, we'll create, places and we'll put all the old people over there. And I think that's tragic because it's the old people that are full of wisdom and that have lived their lives and have learned things that we can all benefit from if we would take the time to spend with them and interact with them. And so what we call aging in place, some people call it aging in community, the idea that we would have the benefit of decades of wisdom, in our communities and around. So, I think that how to move the market is demand. It's the demand of the public because if people are asking for it, eventually there will be more of that kind of housing built in the marketplace. And what I call Peter Pan housing built for people that never grow old, is the type of housing that most of us live in. And how do we change that to a forever home, which is a house really built for people of all ages and abilities. And we like to use what we call universal design, which is a home, a living environment designed and built for the other 85%. And it doesn't have to be anything necessarily particularly specialized, doesn't have to be anything particularly technological, although it could be, but it's just common sense, wider doorways, open floor plans, zero step entries, curbless showers, those kinds of things. So the question often comes up, should I move or should I modify? And the fact that there are not affordable, accessible homes on the market to move into changes that conversation in large part. Because there are many people who, they have a large home, way more home than they really need or want to take care of. If there were affordable, accessible housing on the market, that they could sell this large home and move into a smaller home and hopefully have some leftover funds to help, pay for their lifestyle. That often would be a great solution. But if those homes aren't available, then we're looking more at how do we change the environment? How do we change the home? And all of you have one of these, and this is a piece that goes into a lot of the kind of changes that we can make in people's homes to make them safer and more accessible. Safety really is first. We're looking at safety, we're looking at fall prevention, we're looking at how do we keep people from an injury or an accident that might be the end of them being able to live independently. And then accessibility and then comfort. So that's kind of the three priorities when we're looking at somebody's situation. And it's interesting because I get I'm not ready for that yet from a lot of people. I'll get a call right after Thanksgiving. My phone rings off the hook because, kids have come home for Thanksgiving and they're like, wow, mom or dad's not doing as well as they were doing last year. And I'm concerned about them and what can we do about it? And sometimes mom or dad will say, I'm not letting you in my house. I don't want any part of that. I don't need that. I don't want that. And people wait until there's a problem, there's a fall, there's a stroke, there's a traumatic life event, in which case their options are reduced considerably. And so what I found is those people who want to plan ahead and say, okay, we're building a house or we're remodeling our house and we want this to be our forever home. Even though we're doing quite well now, we're healthy and mobile and everything's good. Those are the people who have been caregivers. Those are the people who have seen what the other side of the coin looks like in caring for a parent or someone else who needs assistance. And so they understand, oh, well, I don't want to put my kids through that. I want my home to be already set up and already established before the need arises. Questions?
Is there a place outside of Roanoke that has better options for senior homes that you've seen?
The newer,
Repeat the question, please.
yes. So the question is, are there places outside of Roanoke that are doing a better job with aging in place options, with being aware of the needs and trying to do something about it? The New River Valley in general has been quite proactive in thinking about these things. They've had an aging in place task force for, gosh, 12, 15 years. There certainly is more awareness in general. There are a number of localities around the country that have made attempts through mandates to mandate in new construction some of these kinds of things like wider doorways and zero step entries. And so in my perception, there's lots of communities around the country that are paying attention and being more proactive than we are here, because the local governments recognize that it's a societal issue and will continue to get more so as there are more older people, particularly living alone, particularly in the low income areas where they don't have the resources to hire, in-home care. They don't have the resources to bring in help and that kind of thing. One of the things that we have here in Virginia that I'm always shocked that nobody knows about is the Livable Homes Tax Credit. The Livable Homes Tax Credit is a $5,000 credit against your state income tax if you remodel your house and incorporate accessibility features. If you put in a curbless shower, if you put in wider doorways, if you put in a wheelchair ramp, if you put in grab bars, if you put in any of the kind of features to make it non-slip flooring, to make it safer and more accessible, get half of whatever you spend on the remodel up to $5,000. And that can be carried forward 7 years on your income taxes if you do not have that much liability that year. And that also applies to a new home. If you build a new home that has at least one zero-step entry, that has 3-foot doors on the main level and has an accessible bathroom, you also qualify for that tax credit, yes.
What are the qualifications? Like, does it have to be installed by someone who does it? So you could just do it yourself?
You could do it yourself.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, oh, the question was, I'm sorry, on the tax credit, do the modifications have to be made by a licensed contractor? And the answer is no. But you have to present receipts. So if you were to do the work yourself, you would have the receipts for the product. And unless you could produce an invoice or something showing, the cost of the labor, probably would be harder to justify. But certainly if you were to go buy a curbless shower, you were to go buy a wider doorway or a ramp or something like that, and you would certainly qualify the cost of materials actually. Yes, sir.
2-part question. Number one, is there an income limit or restriction, and also how does one apply?
Okay. So the question was on the livable homes tax credit, is there an income requirement and how do you go about applying for it? There is not an income requirement. The only requirement is it's a tax credit. If you don't pay any state income tax, it's not going to do you any good. But there's no, it's not income based in any way. And the form is, it's through the VHDA, the Virginia Housing Development Authority. And if you just go online and search for livable home tax credit in Virginia, it'll take you to the form, and it's a simple 2-page form. You fill it out, say, here's the changes I made. They do want before and after pictures, and here's the receipts for the work that I had done. And you have to send it in by the end of January of the following year. Like if you do the work in 25, you've got to send this in before the end of January 26, and then they send you a letter that you file with your tax return. They did a real sneaky thing a few years ago. It used to be the end of February. And then one year they changed it and didn't tell anybody. And that was, and I just written an article saying you have till the end of February, and somebody wrote to me and said, they say you only have till the end of January. So that was not good, but it's fairly simple. They do have a limited pool of money, and if the applicants go beyond that, they start prorating the credit, which may be why they don't tell anybody about it. So
Have to be on primary residence, or can you do it on rental property
you
too?
cannot do it on rental property. Has to be primary residence.
Could the tenants do it on a rental property? And is
No.
there an age restriction?
There's not an age restriction, but it has to be primary residence owned, and it's available to the owner or the contractor. So what I do is all of the jobs that I do that are eligible for this tax credit, I offer to my customers. And then every year I have a few that don't pay state income tax because they're, disabled or, various reasons that people are exempt from state income tax, and then I file those. But it is not available for renters. However, the VHDA does have a grant. It's an $8,000 grant that renters can qualify for the same kind of work. They have a similar grant for homeowners, so you can there's an $8,000 grant. Now that does have an income requirement for the grant. And then there's also a veteran, it's called Granting Freedom. We do a lot of work for disabled veterans, and there's 3 different grants that disabled veterans can get. There's the Special Adaptive Housing Grant, and there's the Granting Freedom Grant, and then the HISA, which is Home Improvement Structural Alteration. So anybody who's a a service-connected disabled veteran, there are significant grant opportunities too. We pay for that. So I mentioned my YouTube channel, Senior Remodeling Experts. I'm starting a series of videos that I call Aging in Place is a Team Sport. And what I mean by that is that in order for people to successfully age in place, there are a number of components that are very important for them to have in place. Housing is the part that I do, having a home that's accessible, that's safe, that's user-friendly, that there's fall prevention in place is obviously a very important piece of that puzzle, but there's also healthcare. They have to be able to get to and from their doctor's appointments. They have to have, falling, oftentimes balance is an issue. There are some therapies that people can do to improve their balance so they're less likely to fall in the first place. And so occupational therapists and physical therapists are one of the contingencies that takes my CAPS class, as well as remodelers and realtors and manufacturers and a lot of other people like that. Transportation is another issue. A lot of times when people get to the point where their facilities are not as sharp as they once were, driving becomes very dangerous. But yet taking away somebody's driving privileges is it's a sensitive subject, because it's not just driving. It represents freedom. It represents, your autonomy to be able to go where you want, when you want to go. And so that becomes a whole, question. There's a lot of talk about walkable communities. There's a lot of talk about, having the kind of close-knit communities that we used to have, where everything's close. It's interesting because the whole idea of the subdivision, Levittown in Long Island, and that whole idea after World War II of subdivisions was all based on the automobile. It was all based on the car. And, so people were living farther away from stores and services and all the things that used to, like in a small village, you could walk to the butcher and the baker and everything was right there. And so now we have, as our society gets older, the whole idea of transportation and cars, and then becomes maybe a hindrance. So that aging in place is a team sport. It takes a lot of different pieces, a lot of different services to make it comfortable and safe for people to live at home when they're experiencing some health issues. Yeah.
We've got a question from Laura from Zoom land.
Okay.
Chris, I have a follow-up
Hi,
question.
Laura.
Hey, how are you? I'm enjoying it. Are all of the grants that you have referenced accessible through the VHDA website?
A question from Laura, but we're not hearing anybody.
Yeah, we may have to do that.
Could you put it in the chat?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We'll do that. Go ahead.
So anyway, talking about the aging in place as a team sport. Yes.
Well, going back to the tax credit.
Yeah.
Other than that, equity, reverse mortgage, does Medicare, Medicaid pay for anything? Do they contribute in any way, shape or form?
Medicare will pay for the wheelchair, but they will not pay for a ramp to get it in the house. They will pay for a Hoyer lift, which is a lift that lifts someone up and rolls them around, which are very ineffective in most houses. There's just not enough room. They won't pay for a ceiling lift. So Medicare, it basically does not help with home modifications, period. They've been talking about it for years, but very little movement. Medicaid, there are Medicaid waivers, which would be essentially if you have a resident who, by making a modification to their home, they can live in their home. If they didn't have the modification, they would have to be in a facility, and Medicaid would have to pay for the facility. those Medicaid waivers typically are $5,000 a year. And so there's a lot of red tape involved with that. So, but that's the Medicaid piece. Some long-term care insurance policies will pay for home modifications.
Cause I think that's the big problem that you run into around here. And then also, as you know, some of these older houses are broken up and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm also a builder. You've got to have a minimum riser height, correct? So
Well, there's a maximum riser.
there's a minimum and a maximum. So, and I think a lot of that has to do with, you know, snow accumulation and water and yada, 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 but you're gonna have that step up to some degree. So building, you know, down the road, you know, have you been able to get anywhere with the county? With, you know, any other jurisdiction in terms of, you know, building for aging in place for the future? So that you don't have to have, you know, you don't have to have easy ramps there. You don't have to have this, you don't have to have that.
The challenge with
It's
having a
gonna be
zero.
hard to repeat that question because it was very
Yeah.
long-winded.
So the question is, how do you get around the fact that, you know, you don't want your house floor to be the same level as the grass outside for, you know, a number of reasons, most of which that any wood has to be 8 inches above the grade just for rot and termites and that kind of thing. And so the easiest way to get a 0-step entry, if you're building a house and you can do, it's basically a reverse brick shelf where your floor framing is inset on the inside of your foundation. You've got concrete that comes up to the level of your floor. And then you can do essentially a bridge from your front door out to the grade. And there's at the door itself, your grade is 8 inches below, but you've got a concrete bridge over to a sidewalk. And so you come up the sidewalk and across this bridge and into the house. So it's all a 0-step entry. That you can do, takes a little extra work. You're gonna wanna have a covered roof over that entryway because public access sill doors are notorious for getting water blown under the door, so you wanna cover it. So there are ways to create a 0-step entry at grade without violating code and without water intrusion in the house. You just have to know some techniques. But come to my CAPS class.
Yeah.
The question we had from Zoom was the grants you were talking about, are they accessed through the VHDA website?
The VHDA grants in this area are administered through Blue Ridge Independent Living Center on Williamson Road. So they're the ones that they come out, look at the house and they file the paperwork, and they're the third party intermediary on the grants. Yes.
Someone asked about Medicare, Medicaid, you know, what they can provide anything like that, and it just sparked, and then the question about what's available in the community. I remember taking a tour of a program here in Roanoke that's like some kind of housing alliance, and they build ramps and whatnot for people that apply for it. Do you know what I'm talking about? I can't remember the name.
Renovation Alliance.
Okay,
Yes, Renovation Alliance does and it's not, they do accessibility work, but they also do just general repair work for low income people, and they're a great organization. But like a lot of those kind of organizations, the need vastly outweighs.
yeah,
the
they
resources.
really don't have enough people or funding.
Right, and Habitat for Humanity also does, you know, some of that kind of work, and they have done several houses that were designed to be accessible and to meet like aging in place kind of needs. So, and there's church groups and private organizations, and so, yeah, there's help. You just have to be a detective kind of to find out, you know, what's available and what the requirements are.
We need a little, like, list somewhere online of all the options.
Well, you know, they're called The Key now, but Generation Solutions was a home care company, and they attempted to do a directory a number of years ago where they would have all these different providers that I talked about under Aging in Place as a team sport. And they did some background checks and put something together, all on their own. And I think that kind of thing is very, very helpful. And there's not really anything like that I'm aware of right now. A number of people have tried to do it. I have said for years that whoever can kind of come up with a delivery vehicle to help people find these resources when they need them is going to be just a huge difference in the marketplace. Because what happens is people don't think about it. They don't want to think about it until it becomes a crisis. And so somebody falls, somebody has a stroke, somebody has a medical emergency, and all of a sudden their family has to spring into action and figure out, you know, what do we do? I mean, I don't even know what questions to ask, much less who I can trust to ask the questions to. And, you know, it's overwhelming. And I mean, I understand that because I got into this business doing things for my mother. And even though I helped take care of my mother and my father, it wasn't until 2021 was my first $1 million year in my business. We had a great year. We had a 22% net profit margin at the end of the year. Things were looking very, very positive.
Yeah.
And then in December of that year, my wife Barbara, 33 years, she started having chest pain. And she thought she had pneumonia, and we got some antibiotics, and it didn't help. And January 13th of 22, we went to the emergency room and they did a chest X-ray. And she had stage 4 lung cancer. And this statement that I had been making for years, that you become a caregiver suddenly, you should modify your home and you should make it accessible and you should be ready for when the all of that seemed very hollow all of a sudden. And yeah, we made some changes, and we made things in our home, you know, because I knew how to do that. But the emotional and the mental and just wrapping my mind around suddenly I'm the caregiver. And she passed away in July of that year. And it has changed the urgency and the intensity with which I share the message that I share. And in my work, particularly with the veterans, and we have a lot of veterans that have very serious progressive illnesses when we are brought on the scene. And we have lost a number of clients, you know, right before and in the middle and right at the end of doing projects. Having been in that situation myself, it's just the ability to understand and to comprehend and to just reach out with compassion. Because it's what I've learned, I mean, it's the hard times in our life, it's the struggles, it's the pain that make us who we are, that make us able to really reach out and be compassionate and serve others. Because in the final analysis, what are any of us doing, whatever business we're in, whether we're in real estate or construction or whatever it is, we're here to serve people. And if we're not serving people at a high level, then, you know, we're not successful. I mean, I don't care how many sales we have, if we're not touching people's lives. And, you know, you all have the ability to, you know, you run up people in all kinds of situations, or they're looking for a new house for various reasons. You know, sometimes it's because of a family change, sometimes it's because of a work change, sometimes it's because they just want a better house. But listening to their needs and hearing their needs and serving them at a high level is what makes you successful. It's what makes me successful. And, you know, I've always said to my kids, I said, the money will take care of itself. You serve people and take care of people's needs and provide for them a service that's valuable to them. You know, your needs will be taken care of. So,
Has business recovered since then?
yes. Yes, it has. I went through a period where when Barbara got sick, I told my team, I said, just do what you can. If there's a business when I get back, there'll be a business when I get back. And then, for a while I was there, but I wasn't there. And then I went through a period where I just was traveling and going to every conference I could just to kind of get away from. And, yes, we're on track to do a lot of business this year. And really looking at, you know, the whole YouTube thing and reaching people. And when I first got into the aging in place and accessibility, I did a lot of these speaking engagements. I spoke to church groups, I spoke to, you know, service clubs at Kiwanis and the Rotary and places like that. And then I got busy and kind of backed off from that. And now I'm, you know, looking for more speaking engagements. So if anybody has a group or has, you know, knows of one, I'm certainly open to come and speak to your group. So, but yeah, it has. Thank you for asking. Yes.
Do you find that downsizing is a little bit of a challenge when you go into to try to help somebody?
Yeah.
Repeat the question.
So the question is downsizing a challenge? And we've had several very challenging. We had a couple out in Blue Ridge a number of years ago, and they were classic hoarders. I mean, their house, you really could not walk. Just there's a little pathway through the stuff, and their sink in their kitchen had been leaking and it was so piled up, they never used it. It was just piled up, but the water underneath had rotted out the whole wall underneath. When we took the cabinets out, you could see the backyard through the bottom of the wall. And we partnered with a professional organizer who came in and helped them, you know, work through all that stuff. That's one of those team players, you know, professional organizers. Oftentimes just, you know, the amount of stuff, I got a lot of stuff myself. And so it's sometimes you need help. Like, you know, are you ever really going to use that? You know, I'm saving it, my kids might want it. You know, the kids don't want it. And, you know, I think that a lot of kids are, you know, they're minimalists that are like, we don't want all that stuff. So yeah, that's part of the process. And part of the reason why maybe people don't want to consider moving, because wow, then I got to deal with all this stuff. So. I mean, I can go on, but unless there's other questions, yes.
Yeah, so as far as grab bars go, is there a certain way that you recommend that, especially for like a shower or a bathtub? That's not just code, but it helps, you know, like have one that's horizontal, one that's on a diagonal.
What I like to do as far as grab bar placement, I like to have the person who's going to be using them, they're right there and have them reach where it's comfortable. There's no one size fits all. If you have somebody that's had a stroke, maybe their left side is not functioning, so putting a grab bar over here is going to do them no good whatsoever. Typically on a shower, we'll do a vertical bar at whichever side they get in, and a horizontal bar, you know, on the back wall. But again, depending on what the person, you know, what side's strong, what side's weak, what, you know, where they naturally reach, because it should be, grab bars should be installed. I think every shower should have grab bar. You know, because all of us sometimes, you know, we don't feel well, we're tired, you know, got soap in our eyes, and, you know, it's easy to slip. And if it's there and you're used to grabbing it, then you're gonna just automatically grab it. But, you know, people associate that with, oh, that means I'm surrendering to the ravages of aging because I'll let somebody put a grab bar on my shower.
And as far as like traction or anti-slip, what do you recommend
In showers or in general?
in general?
There are a number of coatings that you can get, to like brush on certain types of firm surface flooring like tile or that kind of thing that adds some grip to it. There's also coatings you can put on a shower. There's the stick-on, you know, gritty pads in showers that you can use. So there's a number of products that are
Are there
readily
any
available.
tile products that have come out that are already created that way for installation?
Yeah, if you look at tile, any kind of floor tile, you'll look on there and there's something called the coefficient of friction, which measures how slip resistance that tile is. On our VA jobs, we have to spec tile that has a coefficient of friction above the threshold, which is 0.42. And you have to have that. But the problem is a lot of the vinyl floors, other types of floors, they don't make that measurement. So, and the other thing you have to be careful of, if you have someone with certain conditions like Parkinson's, where they kind of shuffle when they walk, if the floor is too non-slip, it can be a problem for them. So, you know, you kind of have to have, and again, this is where you want to have a team. If you've got an occupational therapist, you've got a healthcare provider who's familiar with their prognosis and says, okay, this person needs, you know, a floor that's less slippery, or this person needs, you know, a grab bar right here, or this person needs that kind of thing.
But if you're talking about like building new homes, like a builder coming in and creating new inventory, and they're not specific to Parkinson's
Right.
patients or whatever, then how do you know kind of what is the
Well,
guide?
that's when we would do what we call universal design. We would want a 0-step entry. We would want wide doorways and hallways. We would want non-slip flooring. We would want, you know, accessible bathrooms. We would want, you know, maybe lower countertops in the kitchen. Plenty of room is a big part of that. So when you're in that scenario, you're kind of trying to get the bell curve. You're trying to get something that would work for most of the population. I mean, it's never going to be 100% perfect. You could find somebody with a condition that say, oh, well, we should have done this other flooring, but it's going to be way, way better than what we call, you know, standard housing.
And I think the problem with some of it is it's not aesthetically pleasing. Right? So if you get somebody who's say 50, who is thinking long-term, they don't necessarily want to walk into a home that makes them feel like they're elderly already.
Right. Well, the
So-
perception is that it's not aesthetically pleasing, and certainly there's enough examples of people who have done it in a way that's not aesthetically pleasing because it was done in that crisis mode, and you know, somebody has fallen or had a stroke, or they're trying to come home and they don't care what it looks like, they got to get it done, or mom's going in a nursing home. And so that's what most people are used to seeing, but there are plenty of examples. We've done plenty of very high-end, completely accessible bathrooms, gorgeous tile. It just doesn't have a curve, and the doorways are wider, and the hallways are wider, and there's some really high-end grab bars, you know, you can get.
I was
that-
literally gonna ask that while ago. I was like,
Yeah.
are there like designer grab bars?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. There's
It's
some,
good to know.
there's some really, really neat grab bars if that's what it is. Yes.
I was just gonna say, then you're looking at cost effectiveness, and the cost becomes a huge factor, I think, at that point, because those things are not, I don't think, manufactured as readily as the things that are less expensive.
Right, and you have to weigh that, okay, what's the, you know, a side open, wall oven is a great example. Okay, if you're in a wheelchair, or you're seated and you're trying to pull this over and reach in over the door like this and take something out of the oven, that's dangerous. And you can get a side open wall oven, but they're 3 or 4 times the cost of a standard wall oven. But assisted living is $4,000 a month.
They still don't have.
Nursing care is $8,000 a month. So. You know, it's. But you're right, I mean, cost is definitely a factor in all of these discussions.
Are you still building houses from scratch?
Okay, we built one last year for a double amputee veteran. We don't build a whole lot of new houses right now, but we've had more interest so far this year than we've seen in a while, so I'm certainly open to that if, yes, Con.
Can you tell us what your process is when when someone is referred to you? From start to finish?
Okay, so the question is, what is our process when someone is referred to us, or we get a call from someone who is considering making these kinds of changes?
Correct.
We do an initial discovery call, and we find out as much as possible about their situation, what their needs are, whether or not they kind of have a good idea of what they want, or whether they're just kind of knowing that what they have isn't working right now. And then we will go out and we will look at the home, and we will put together a suggested scope of work based on what they have told us their financial situation is, what their budget is, what their needs are, and how urgent those needs are. And then we present a range. And then we do what's called project development agreement, which says, you know, we think your project's gonna cost between this much and this much. And we get a 5% deposit, after which we put together a firm fixed price proposal for whatever the project entails.
Thank you.
Okay, 1 second, we have a question from Zoom and then we'll wrap up. I'm sure Chris will stay if you have other questions for him. Do you have any advice for people who need walk-in tubs and showers that Medicare won't pay for? You mentioned the Blue Ridge Center provides these grants in this area, but when it comes to clients who are not in the valley, where do they start to seek help with the financial side to that?
Okay, so the question is, how do people get help with a tub or a shower when they don't have the financial wherewithal to pay for it themselves? I mentioned that the VHDA grants are administered by the Blue Ridge Independent Living Center in the Roanoke area. There are similar agencies throughout the state. New River Valley is the New River Valley Disability Resources Center. The one in Martinsville, I forget what it's called. But if you go to the VHDA website and look up accessibility grants, there's a list there for every county in the state, which agency they would go to get that same, third party.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming and thank you.
You're
We'll
welcome.
stay afterwards for any questions.
Okay,
I have a question.
Yeah.
On the home builder class that you're doing for the certifications,